All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about forgetting. So let's first talk about why we forget. There are several reasons as to why. Number one is not technically forgetting. This is called childhood amnesia. And this is based on the fact that you need sufficient brain development and language skills to actually form memories. This is why most people don't have any memories prior to the age of probably 3 or so, because when you're an infant, 1 or 2, you may not have any memories because your ability to store them wasn't there. Now, we can implant false memories, and you'll have a fun little homework assignment on false memories. This is studied by Elizabeth Loftus from University of Washington back in the 1990s, actually 1980s and 90s. And what can happen here is that you can tell stories to, say, your sibling of things that happened to them when they were an infant. And even though they have no memory of it, if they keep hearing the same story over and over and over again, pretty soon they can store a false memory of that event that never occurred. So that can happen. But generally speaking, we won't have any memories prior to the age of 3 or so. Next, we have motivated forgetting. This is called repression. So we talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about dreams and dream analysis. So sometimes when people have different types of traumatic events that happen to them, they try to push it out of their conscious mind because it's too painful to think about. These memories are still there. They've just been repressed. So we are motivated to forget them to prevent pain and suffering and whatnot. And what happens is that when our defenses are not working, which we'll talk about when we talk about Freud in a couple chapters down the road, when defenses aren't working, like when we are sleeping at night, then these memories will seep out into our dreams. So they're there. We just are motivated not to think about them. Next, we have stress. So we talked about this too. Many people have what's called test anxiety. And sometimes when we're stressed, we're trying to remember someone's name, or you're watching Jeopardy trying to remember the answer to a question. It feels like the answer is right there, like on the tip of your tongue, but you can't remember it. That's caused by stress. And it's not exactly clear why stress causes these memory issues, but it seems to do it. Sorry. Next, we have neurological illnesses, diseases, or injuries. So that would be things such as Alzheimer's disease and so on. So this is a problem within the brain. Could be due to a brain injury. It could be due to a genetic problem. Who knows? But that can cause memory loss. But for most of us, the main reason why we don't remember is the unavailability of retrieval cues. So we talked about this in the first 2 videos in this section, where sometimes we don't have the proper retrieval cue to find stored memories and bring them back into consciousness. So we're going to explore this a little bit more by talking about what's called the encoding specificity principle. And this is based on the fact that in order for retrieval to be effective, your retrieval cue must match what's stored in the memory trace. And so when we encode a memory, there are aspects of the context around us that are encoded in that memory trace too. It could be our physical surroundings, it could be our moods, it could be the time of day, the weather outside, the location, and so on. So all these different aspects of what we call context get stored in the memory along with the actual memory. So like we said, when you're a child, you went to the beach, you had a memory of being there with your grandparents, but also there were certain smells that you encoded in the memory trace. There are certain sounds and certain sights. And that's why, the sound of the ocean, the smell of the ocean air, maybe the sight of the pier can bring back the same memory because all those aspects were scored in the memory trace. So here's an example of how this works. This was a study done by Gordon Bower back in 1981. So Bower used hypnosis to put subjects into a happy or sad mood state. What happened here is that subjects came to the laboratory. He read off a list of adjectives to make them either happy or sad. And then he gave them a memory test to remember the words that they read the next day. So they come into the lab. He places them under hypnosis. He induces a sadder happy mood state. They then study a list of words. He takes them out of hypnosis. They go home. Next day they come back. Once again, they're placed under hypnosis. And then he once again tests their memory for what they studied the previous day. What he found out is that when the moods match at encoding and retrieval. So you notice right here where it says 80%. They're encoding when they're sad. They're taking a test when they're sad. So when that happens, oh, I see mistake. So up here where it says encoding, this should be over here. I think I missed a tab spot. So that's my mistake. Sorry about that. But anyway, so this is your encoding, sad or happy. This is your retrieval, sad or happy. And so what's going to happen then is that when encoding and retrieval are both sad, you have 80%. When encoding and retrieval are both happy, you have 75%. So you're more likely to remember when the moods match at both study and at test. So a good example is that when I was a kid, well, not so much kid, I was probably like in middle school. My sister was in high school and she had a boyfriend, and tragically they broke up. And she was sad and distraught, and she was in her room, and so of course her friends come over to cheer her up. And so being the brother, you got to listen into the conversation and see what's going on, right? And so what I did is I got one of those little baby monitors and stuck it under her bed, because you can't, put your ear next to the door. That's not going to work. So the baby monitor is the best way to listen to it. And so I was listening to their conversation. And so you would think that they would say things that would make her happy to cheer her up, right? But because they're all in a sad mood, what's going to come to mind? Sad things. So instead, what they talked about is who had the worst boyfriend, who had the worst breakup, how all guys are pigs, we hate guys, we'll never date another guy, blah, 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 blah. And that's what they talked about. And I'm sure what happened is that when her friends went home, they probably just got on the phone and called up their boyfriends right away and told them what happened. But that's beside the point. But anyway, so the idea is that when you're sad, sad memories come to mind. When you're happy, happy memories come to mind. And when you think about it, that's generally true. That's generally true. So that's mood and memory. We also have another one called environmental context effects. This is where, once again, the time of day or your physical surroundings can also be stored in the memory trace. Another study similar to the mood and memory was done by Godin and Baddeley. This time they used scuba divers as their subjects. And so what they did is they had scuba divers come to like a big aquarium, like if you've ever been to Monterey Bay Aquarium, it'd be a place like that. And so what they did is they had them study a list of words on land, or they put the scuba gear on, dived underwater. They walked up to the big glass case where you could see the sharks swim and all that. And they had some guy hold up words that they studied for a memory test. Next day they come back. What's going to put on either their scuba diver outfits and take the test underwater, or they study or take the test on land. And once again, what you'll see here is that when retrieval matches, they study on land, take the test on land. They have higher recall than when it doesn't match. So 38% for land, 32% for water. And so I guess the best way to think about this is that if you are an eyewitness to a crime scene, suppose that on your way home you stop at a shop and rob. And for those of you who don't know what a shop and rob is, that would be like a 7-Eleven. So you go there to shop, you buy a soda, you buy some candy or some snacks, whatever, and also you probably get robbed there because it's a shop and rob. So anyway, suppose you go to shop and rob, you go there to buy a soda, and you see a criminal holding up the store, and you're an eyewitness to it. When the police want to interrogate you as to what you remember from the crime scene, would it be better to be questioned at the police station, or would it be better to be tested or questioned at the actual crime scene? And the answer is, well, the crime scene. Because when you're actually at the crime scene, there's different aspects of the context. Maybe you remember when you're looking at the counter, you saw out the window behind the clerk, there was a car parked outside, and it was a green Buick or whatever. And so just being there can bring back memories that you may not remember at a different place, such as a police station. So that's kind of interesting. There's been a lot of research on that, so you'll see more about this or read more about this in the actual textbook, the Revel textbook. All right. Also with forgetting, we have the famous study by Hermine Ebbinghaus. This was on the forgetting curve. So this was an interesting study because back in the day, they really didn't have fun things to do. So they didn't have TV and video games and all that. So I guess what people did for fun is they would make nonsense syllables like DAX-192, and they try to memorize them. And they would record, actually, Hermine Ebbinghaus would record how long it took to learn these nonsense syllables, and then he would test to see how long it took to forget them. And based on this, he came up with two basic principles called the forgetting curve and the methods of savings. And what happened here is that with the forgetting curve, what we found out is that 40% of what you learn is forgotten after just 20 minutes. Which means that if you don't review your lecture notes after you go and watch the lecture videos or study your lecture notes or whatever, or read the textbook, you're going to quickly forget it. After one day, you lose almost 3/4 of it, 70%. And then after 1 week, 3/4 is lost. So this is why distributed study is going to be much better than mass studying, because if you don't keep rehearsing it on a frequent basis, that information will be quickly forgotten. So that's called the forgetting curve. Now, the good thing to keep in mind is that even though you studied it and you think you forgot it, it's still there. For example, say in high school you took a Spanish class. You took 2 years of Spanish. You may have remembered the Spanish information pretty well. You may have remember some of the words. You may be able to have a small conversation in Spanish. But then after graduation, you don't speak Spanish anymore. That information is quickly forgotten. But say, your second year in college, you take another Spanish class. What's going to happen here is that you'll relearn that information much quicker because it's still stored in memory, but because you haven't used it, you have to develop those retrieval cues once again. And so once you start hearing the words and hearing the sentences and all that, it quickly comes back to mind. So that's called the method of savings. So those are two important principles of the research by Hermine Ebbinghaus. And so we're going to stop there for now. And in the next video, we're going to talk about amnesia. And then there'll be another homework assignment that you'll find kind of interesting on amnesia. So once again, if you guys have questions, make sure that you contact me through Pronto or through email, or you can post a question on the Q&A discussion board.